forced America to take the vaccine, Bill. 70% Americans took the vaccine and they didn't want to take it. A lot of them didn't want to take it.
Wait a second. When did the vaccine come about? Under Biden? No, under Trump.
No, it didn't. It came 2 days after election was over with. 2 days after election was over with, Pfizer announced it was not under Trump.
Oh.
He doesn't know anything. He's threatening to take media outlets he doesn't like off the air. Put it all aside. Bill, when it comes down to it, are you for force or freedom? That's the reductionist game.
Yeah. Bill Maher's mask just slipped, and the entire woke left is panicking. Patrick Bet David exposed their authoritarian playbook on national television. Now David Pakman is having a complete meltdown. The battle isn't left versus right anymore. It's freedom versus force, and they know they're losing.
You are preaching to the converted here. I'm always bitching about this. I do not.
You're supporting Biden, though.
Of course, because we only get two choices. I mean, what is so hard to understand about bad and worse?
They forced America to take the vaccine, Bill. 70% Americans took the vaccine and they didn't want to take it. A lot of them didn't want to take it.
Wait a second. When did the vaccine come about? Under Biden? No, under Trump.
No, it didn't. It came 2 days after election was over with. 2 days after election was over with, Pfizer announced it was not under Trump.
Oh.
They intentionally kept the vaccine.
What's up, patriots? What we witnessed in that exchange was nothing short of a perfect illustration of the core battle in America today. It's not just about Republican versus Democrat anymore. It's about a fundamental question. Do you believe in freedom, or do you believe in force?
Right.
After the election, so they gave the victory to
That's right. But Trump was not Trump was like, I created the vaccine.
I don't disagree with you. I agree with you.
I
takes
see.
it as a victory. I'm on the same page with you.
Okay,
but there's a difference, though.
Yeah,
This is the one difference, Bill.
But
May I say this? May I say this? And then push back. Here's the difference. You know what the difference is? How many times have you heard Trump get on stage and brag about warp speed? We saved 100 million people's lives,
can
right?
I just ask you a simple yes or no question?
Yeah.
Well, not exactly yes or no, but who are you voting for?
I'm voting for whoever allows me to make decisions more, and not somebody that decides what's good for me or not.
Bro.
Okay, this is the game. He's responding to a very simple question, Trump or Biden, with a principle, leaving the audience to figure out, well, based on your principles, clearly you must be voting for, or is it obvious? And Bill Maher does a pretty good job of actually picking apart how silly this all is.
We're not in a debate here.
No, the left.
I asked you a yes or
the vaccine.
Wait a second.
The state of California and the industry you're in force you to take the vaccine.
So you don't know who you're voting for?
I'm voting for whoever allows me to have more freedom with the choices I make.
And you don't know that yet?
It's definitely not going to be Biden.
Well, then it would be Trump, wouldn't it?
If it's between the two choices?
What? But look at you.
Are you kidding me? It's not even a close call, by the way.
But the fact that you just can't own it is very weird, man. You know, this like, who are you voting for? Well, the Constitution says it's two words, Trump, Biden. I'm voting for Biden. I'm owning that. Do I think he's perfect? No.
But I don't think it's like that.
Not even,
I don't think it's like that. I don't think it's like that.
Well, just say you're for Trump.
If a person watches my...
I don't dislike you for your... I don't dislike...
Bill, if somebody watches my podcast, they're gonna know who I'm voting for.
Well,
if somebody watches a podcast, they're going to sit there.
But how odd that you can't just say it then.
Because to me, I'm voting based on values. I'm not voting based on...
Okay, but we know what the values are of Biden and Trump and their policies
You're right.
are. We know everything
the
about
left
them.
Is about force. The right is about choice. I don't want to be forced to have to do something I don't want to do.
And there it is. That's not actually the truth, right? When you look at so many examples, the right is about choice and the left is about force.
PBD absolutely nailed it when he framed the conversation this way. And it's why guys like David Pakman are having complete meltdowns online. Because when you strip away all the noise, all the virtue signaling, all the fancy political terminology, it really does come down to this simple question. The left wants to control what you say, what you think, what you put in your body, how you raise your kids, what your kids learn in school, what kind of car you drive, what kind of energy you use. The list goes on and on. And if you don't comply, they'll use the power of government to force you. Meanwhile, conservatives generally want to leave you alone. Live your life. Make your own choices. Take responsibility for those choices.
You seem to think that that is the sunum bonum of all political issues. It is a very important one to me. There are other ones.
Such as what? What's above force versus freedom?
Crazy person in the White House?
According to who?
Again, well, it's my opinion.
That's
it's my
right.
vote. It's all,
Okay,
just like it
but
is
set
yours.
that aside. Set
But
that
it's
aside.
hardly the only point.
I love that. They love doing this. Okay, listen. Hold on. Set aside Trump's crazy. Trump's an embarrassment.
Now, I want to talk about Bill Maher for a minute. The guy positions himself as this free-thinking liberal who's willing to criticize his own side. And to his credit, he has called out some of the more insane aspects of the woke left in recent years. But in that conversation with PBD, we saw his true colors when Patrick brought up the vaccine mandates, a clear example of government force. Over personal freedom, Maher immediately tried to deflect and turn it into a Trump versus Biden thing. Did you notice that? Instead of addressing the actual principle at stake, should the government be able to force medical procedures on citizens, Maher wanted to talk about who developed the vaccine and when. That's because deep down, despite all his claims about being a free speech champion and a classical liberal, Maher still has that authoritarian leftist instinct. He believes that some people, the experts and the educated elites, should be able to make decisions for the rest of us because they know better. And then when PBD had Maher backed into a corner with the freedom versus force framework, what did Maher do? He immediately went to abortion. Classic deflection tactic. Oh, but conservatives want to force women not to get abortions. This is such a disingenuous argument, and it completely misses the point. The pro-life position isn't about controlling women's bodies. It's about protecting innocent human life. It's about extending the most fundamental right, the right to life, to the most vulnerable members of our society. The abortion debate is complex precisely because it involves weighing competing rights and interests. But comparing reasonable restrictions on ending a human life to forcing every American to inject an experimental vaccine into their body, that's not even in the same universe. The authoritarian impulse on the left runs deep, folks, and it's gotten significantly worse in recent years. Think about it. They want to force you to use certain pronouns or face consequences. They want to force businesses to implement DEI initiatives. They want to force you to drive electric vehicles. They want to force you to get medical procedures. They want to force certain ideologies in education. They want to force you to give up your guns. They want to force you to pay for massive government programs. Every solution they have involves more government control, more mandates, more regulations, more force. What made PBD's argument so powerful, and what caused Pakman to have such a meltdown, is that it simplifies political discussion in a way that resonates with the average American. Most Americans don't spend their days parsing the nuances of policy positions, but they understand freedom. They understand having the right to make their own choices, and they understand when someone is trying to take those choices away. This is why the freedom versus force framework is so devastating to the left, because when you lay it out plainly, the vast majority of Americans will choose freedom every single time.
28 candidacy. Then it's not going to be Trump or Biden. Forget about the name. And we don't even see a faceless candidate. Put a faceless candidate, Bill. So we don't have a name, right? That's faceless. What values are important to you? Force or freedom? We're not talking 24. We're going 28.
I mean, it's all good to be a reductionist, but I'm sorry. I don't.
It's hard to take it seriously. It becomes hard to take it seriously because not only is it reductionist, it's inaccurate and it's deceptive, and it's not a serious way of determining who actually has the best interests of the country in mind. Trump has only his own interest in mind.
Now, there's another aspect to this that PBD touches on, but we should expand further. The freedom framework isn't just about doing whatever you want. It's about taking personal responsibility for your choices. The left loves to portray conservatives as callous for opposing massive government programs. You don't care about the poor. You don't care about the sick. You don't care about the environment. Nothing could be further from the truth. We believe that private charity, community involvement, and personal responsibility lead to better, outcomes than government force. We believe that people should help their neighbors, not because the government forces them to, but because it's the right thing to do. This is the piece that guys like Maher and Pakman never seem to understand. They view the absence of government force as the absence of care, but that's not how most Americans see it. Let's go back to the COVID example that triggered Pakman so badly. The left's approach was force, lockdowns, mask mandates, vaccine mandates, business closures. Force, force, force. What would a freedom-based approach have looked like? Providing information, making recommendations, allowing individuals to assess their own risk factors, and then letting them make their own choices. Protecting the vulnerable while allowing the majority to live their lives. Would some people have made choices we disagree with? Of course. That's the whole point of freedom. But the data increasingly shows that all that force didn't actually lead to better outcomes. States with fewer restrictions often had similar or better COVID outcomes than those with strict mandates. Now let's talk about why David Pakman is having a complete meltdown over this interview. It's because PBD exposed the fundamental weakness in the progressive worldview. They can't win if the conversation is framed around freedom versus force. The media's job is to obscure this simple framework. They need to complicate the discussion, introduce endless nuance, change the subject, attack the person rather than the argument. Because if Americans start thinking about every policy proposal through the lens of does this increase my freedom or increase government force, the Democrats are in serious trouble. This brings us to why Donald Trump continues to resonate with so many Americans despite the constant attacks from the media and the establishment. For all his flaws, Trump speaks the language of freedom. When he talks about draining the swamp, cutting regulations, or taking on the deep state, he's speaking to Americans' deep desire to be free from unelected bureaucrats controlling their lives. And what does the left do? They mock him. They mock his supporters. They call him stupid, uneducated, racist, or whatever label they can come up with. But they never address the core appeal, the desire for freedom from government overreach. You know what's really going on here. Bill Maher, despite his claims of being anti-establishment, is the perfect example of the elite coastal mindset. He believes that the right people who think like him, should be in charge of making decisions for everyone else. When PBD challenged him on the force versus freedom framework, Maher instinctively knew he couldn't win that argument. Because deep down, despite all his talk about civil liberties, Maher believes in force when it suits his agenda. And that's the dirty little secret of the modern left. They're perfectly happy to use government force to achieve their goals. They just don't want to admit it outright because they know most Americans reject that authoritarian mindset. Now, turning to David Pakman's reaction. What did we witness there? A complete inability to engage with the actual argument. Instead, Pakman had to resort to personal attacks, calling PBD deceptive and reductionist. But he never actually refuted the core argument about freedom versus force. He couldn't. And that's why these guys are always so triggered by thinkers like PBD, because Patrick has found a way to cut through all their verbal gymnastics and expose the authoritarian nature of their worldview. What we're witnessing, folks, is a massive political realignment. It's no longer about traditional Republican versus Democrat issues. It's about freedom versus control. That's why you're seeing former Democrats and liberals walking away from the party. That's why you're seeing minorities, traditionally Democratic voters, moving toward Trump and the Republican Party, because people from all backgrounds and all walks of life value their freedom. They don't want to be told what to do, what to think, what to say, or how to live their lives. As conservative media, our job isn't just to cheer for Republican politicians. It's to promote and defend the principles of individual liberty, limited government, and personal responsibility. PBD did that masterfully in his conversation with Maher. He refused to get bogged down in the typical partisan bickering and instead focused on the fundamental principle at stake. And that's why the left is so terrified of voices like his. Because when the debate is framed around freedom versus force, they lose every time. Let's talk about why platforms like ours are growing while the mainstream media continues to decline. It's simple. We're willing to have the conversations they won't have. CNN, MSNBC, even Fox News to some extent. They're all playing within the same narrow band of acceptable discourse. They might disagree on specific policies, but they rarely challenge the fundamental framework of the debate. Independent voices like PBD, like us here at Black Coffee Podcast, we're willing to step outside that framework. We're willing to ask the deeper questions about what kind of society we want to live in. Do we want to live in a society where the government increasingly controls more aspects of our lives? Or do we want to live in a society where individuals are free to make their own choices and live with the consequences? That's the conversation Americans are hungry for. And it's why alternative media continues to grow while the mainstream media flounders. One of the most encouraging things I'm seeing is the growth of conservative and libertarian thinking among young people. Generation Z is turning out to be surprisingly resistant to the woke indoctrination they've been subjected to. Why? Because they value their freedom. They don't want to be told what pronouns to use, what opinions they're allowed to have, or what kind of life they should aspire to. And they're finding voices like PBD who articulate a vision of personal freedom and responsibility that resonates with them far more than the controlling, authoritarian message of the modern left. Now, I want to be real with you all for a minute. The fight for freedom isn't going to be easy. The forces pushing for more government control, more censorship, more mandates, they are powerful. They control most of our institutions, but what they don't control is the human desire for freedom. That desire runs deep in the American psyche. It's why people from around the world continue to risk everything to come here. And it's why despite all the propaganda, despite all the indoctrination, despite all the social pressure, Americans continue to push back against the authoritarian agenda. So what can you do? How can you be part of this movement for freedom? First, support voices like PBD who are willing to speak truth to power. Share their content, subscribe to their channels, buy their books. Second, engage with people in your life. Don't be afraid to have these conversations. Use the freedom versus force framework to help people understand what's really at stake. Third, get involved locally. School boards, city councils, state legislatures. These are the battlegrounds where many of these fights are playing out. Your voice matters, especially at the local level. Fourth, live the principles in your own life. Take responsibility for your choices. Build strong families and communities. Show people that we don't need government force to create a good society. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to thank Patrick Bet-David for his courage in speaking truth to power. It's not easy to go on a show like Bill Maher's and hold your ground. But PBD did it, and he exposed the fundamental flaw in the progressive worldview. Freedom versus force. That's the real political divide in America today. And when Americans understand that divide clearly, they choose freedom every time. That's why the left is melting down. That's why they're attacking PBD. That's why they can't engage with his actual argument, because deep down they know he's right. Thank you all for joining me today on Black Coffee Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear this message. Until next time, stay free, stay strong, and keep fighting the good fight.